Hello, welcome to EBC TV. My name's James and today we're talking about CBT. I'm joined by Liam from the Vita Health Group, part of Spire Health. Liam, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Did I get that right?
You did. Yeah,
okay,
you did.
Good. It's quite a mouthful. So thank you so much for joining us on EBC TV. It's amazing that we have brilliant people like you volunteering to be on this at this show for the benefit of all our viewers and all the employees that we look after across the UK. Tell me a little bit about CBT. What is it?
So CBT is stands for cognitive behavioural therapy. It's kind of become an umbrella term for a number of approaches to psychotherapy and supporting people's sort of mental well-being. Fundamentally, it is underpinned by three interacting systems, looking at how we think, pretty much anything that goes on our head, thinking, imagery, memories, how that influences how we feel, and then how that influences our subsequent kind of behavior. We find ourselves getting into certain spirals or cycles that we can get into of thinking, feeling, and behaving, which can become a little bit unhelpful. So CBT, like I say, aims to address some of those cycles that we can get stuck into.
And who typically reaches out for CBT support?
Generally, people with who may have been diagnosed with depression or an anxiety disorder, but the nature and the broad approach theory, if you like, it can be applied to pretty much anything. So any sort of level of distress, stress, people in experiencing workplace stress often reach out for CBT as well.
Okay, and does that include things like burnout?
Yes, things like burnout. See, burnout is a bit of a catch-all term, but yes, so the exhaustion people feel, burnout, just generally feeling overwhelmed with life.
Because I hear the phrase burnout is being used a lot more. If you go back 3 or 4 years ago, no one was talking about it in the workplace, and now everyone's talking about it in the workplace. And pretty much everyone I know has said, "Oh, I think I've been burnt out at work."
Yeah.
So is it being used too liberally?
I guess it depends.
Yeah,
it depends. I think if it enables the right people to get the right support, or people who need support to get support, then fine. I think it's like a lot of, it's probably had a funny turn. I'm trying to think of all the historical parlances that I've had for that. Panic was a big one when I was first training, and well, actually it's not panic, but I know what you mean. Or I've got anxiety was a big one that we come from. Burnout seems to have replaced that in this sort of, I'm distressed but don't quite know how to describe it.
So anxiety, stress, and burnout all kind of in the same ballpark.
Similar ballpark. So anxiety is an emotion, is a threat-based emotion. People experience anxiety. It's quite healthy and helpful, kept us alive for millions of years, billions of years, fight or flight. It's anxiety disorders is when it becomes problematic. And I think often people conflated the two of feeling anxious and having an anxiety disorder, which became a bit problematic because everybody then was defined in that way. Doesn't mean you can't get support for managing anxiety on a day-to-day basis, but I think that distinction is probably quite important.
In what ways can CBT techniques help people manage stress, anxiety, or burnout, where they're either in the workplace or in their personal lives? How does CBT help in that way?
So, like I alluded to in the first question, the CBT is based on this idea that cognitions, essentially anything that happens between our ears, so thoughts, memories, images, can influence how we feel, which then can subsequently influence how we behave and act. So what CBT aims to do with things like burnout or stress or anything that aims to support is look at those three big areas and seeing if we can influence change in one to influence change in another. For example, often when we become stressed, burnt out, we might engage in behaviors which are comforting short term, but longer term kind of keep us locked in that. A really good one is nutrition or eating. I know
comfort eating.
Comfort eating. As soon as I get overwhelmed or I reach for, deliveries will go up, McDonald's consumption will go up, fast food will go up. Sleep is another big one. So we first look at the behavioral element. So if we can change some of those behaviors, and starting with the basics, eat and sleep, we would then might look at the other aspects of the behavior around. Another key thing we tend to do when we're feeling distressed is we withdraw back into ourselves, and life can start to become quite obligational. So we end up just doing work, or we end up just being a dad, or just being, someone who cleans the house at home. You kind of get the obligational tasks done. But again, talking from personal experience, you stop listening to music. You've stopped.
Which is criminal, by the way, because music is amazing.
Exactly. And it's those small building blocks that influence how we feel. But we know that if we're feeling a certain way, having certain ideas and our heads come in, that's when those things start to slip. So what CBT does, at a very basic level, goes, okay, so what are you doing? What are you not doing? And how can we adjust that to ensure that we're getting three big areas we look at? Sort of achievement. Are you getting a sense of achievement, a sense of connection with other people, and a sense of enjoyment? So those ideas, you can do on an individual level of, okay, am I getting those three things into my daily routine? If I'm not, how can I? That's the behavioral aspect.
Achievement, connection, and enjoyment.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. And they're the things that go. They're the things that go very, very quickly. If we're feeling distress of any kind, they tend to get put on the back burner, so to speak. You end up becoming, like I say, life becomes very obligational.
Yeah.
The cognitive bit, so that obviously our behavioral strategies, the cognitive element generally falls into two camps.
Yeah.
Approaches that manage the content. So what are we thinking?
Yeah.
So what are the thoughts that are coming into our head that might be certainly reinforcing or creating or magnifying certain elements of distress? So a really good example might be, I'm failing at work.
Yeah.
That thought may pop into your head when you're feeling burnout or distressed. One element of CBT will look at the validity of that thought, will look at the content, the validity. So how true is it?
Yeah.
So you'd work, and often what we do is look at evidence for, evidence against, objective data gathering, and look to go, well, okay, you're telling yourself this, but this is the reality.
Yeah.
And can we come to a slightly different, is there a different way of describing what's happening at the moment? Theoretically being that then relieves an element of distress and improves mood, which will then help you engage in some of the behavioural aspects.
So sometimes it's about challenging the narrative.
Exactly.
Goes with your own experience.
That internal narrative, that internal thoughts, they're so powerful and influence how we feel. I think it's really useful when things are tangible.
Yeah.
However, sometimes those cognitions are not necessarily all that clear in someone's mind, and at times it kind of leads into the other broad cognitive approaches, which are more about relationship with thinking.
Yeah,
and that's where mindfulness. I know that's become a bit of a exploded in the public kind of consciousness.
Being mindful,
being mindful,
and
being
having
aware.
mindful moments. Yeah,
and this idea of, rather than trying to challenge that thought, of being a passive observer of that thought. So rather than going, well, here's the evidence for and against, and here's the, which has its place, mindfulness and mindful based therapies look at, well, I'm going to distance myself from that thought and let it come and go, rather than do anything with it. Just let it run its course.
Yeah.
And both approaches have their place, I think. Both of those cognitive approaches have their place. Like I say, very useful when there's this sort of concrete thought to challenge it directly.
Yeah.
When we're anxious at times, it's almost like a flood of thoughts, I think. There isn't a specific kind of thing that you're worried or anxious about. Burnout's a really good example for this. Not one specific thing, but it's almost this flooding. That's when the sort of, I think, mindfulness-based approaches and strategies can come in.
How does CBT differ from other therapeutic approaches?
Well, there's a caricature of CBT where it's very change-driven. It's very much that this is about doing and change, and almost business-like, here's the problem, this is what we're going to do about it.
Yeah.
And there are some elements of truth to that. There are specific techniques that we use in CBT. There is assignments to do in between session that build from the therapeutic session that you had with somebody. It's collaborative. It's about working almost with a coach, if you like, in a CBT setting.
One-to-one, typically?
One-to-one, typically, yeah. And I mean, it can be applied in group settings, and kind of alluded to earlier, can be done as self-help, but in a one-to-one setting, it's like I say, a lot more, probably a lot more structured than other approaches to therapy.
Because there are a lot of self-help options, apps or things that people can download, or things that people might have pre-recorded, or audio stuff that they've got that will help them. When, in your mind, do people trip from self-help to needing formal support? Yeah,
I think it's a really good question. I think it really is. I think the physical health analogy can help a little bit of, you can have all the gym equipment, but sometimes you need a coach to guide you in terms of what you need to use. And if you're there going, I'm reading all these self-help manuals, I've got these dumbbells, but I don't really know how to swing them. I don't really know how to use this. And sometimes that's emotional. Sometimes if you burn out, you get that sort of brain fog, and you just can't make sense of things. I think the other bit that's quite difficult to do on your own, and it's helpful to see a therapist around, is the making sense of it.
Yeah,
I think you can apply these techniques and strategies in isolation. I think they can work really, really well. But if you're seeing a therapist, what you do often before that point is just make sense of, okay, so what's keeping this going? How have we got to this point? And I would say if you're struggling with engaging with those strategies, that bit can be really, really helpful to understand why you're finding even the strategies difficult to engage with.
And is that really an individual setting the wrong narrative or the wrong response to something? They've taken themselves so far in trying to rationalize some thinking, but actually the way that you're rationalizing it now needs someone else to coach you beyond where you've got to.
Yeah, and I think that holding a mirror up to it is helpful at times. And I think some of those narratives become almost truth. They almost become, that's who I am, that's truth, and you don't see it as distorted, for want of a better word. It's reality. It doesn't matter how well you're doing at work. It doesn't matter how much you get pat on the back. Your mind has got to that place where it doesn't allow the information in. Do you know what I mean? And it's such a, our minds are really, really powerful, and allowing information in that fits with how we feel. It's had lots of difficulties in the world, probably are where we're at the moment. But if you have this self view that you're failing, your mind tends to let things in that prove that, and won't let things in that doesn't.
Yeah,
and I think that's when an external person who can just be curious, Socratic, guided around. Okay, so what about this? Does that marry up with what you're thinking?
Maybe someone challenging your algorithm, because it's a bit like if you like and click certain things on a social media platform, you'll start being fed stuff like that.
100%.
And there's nothing challenging that view. So it starts to become the truth. But it might not be. How do people decide what type of support is right for them when they're on this journey?
So, like I said, it's probably level. So first talk about self-help and then reaching out for support. So we've kind of touched on that. I would suggest level of distress, level of impact on functioning is probably the word that we use, is how much is this impacting on your day-to-day life. If you're managing to get to work, you manage to hold out a relationship, but you're mildly distressed, some self-help might be absolute perfect thing to look at. And probably CBT, it's got the strongest evidence base for most of the difficulties that people present with. So some self-help around CBT would be really helpful. Then you're looking at, okay, out of these myriad of therapies that are out there in the world, what might be right for me? And broadly speaking, they fall into two camps. You've got on one extreme, really technique-driven CBT, which is about, here are your symptoms and here are some things to do with your symptoms, and you're going to work with someone, CBT therapist, who is going to coach you, help you make sense of it, but coach you do some of these things. On the other extreme, you've got counselling, more of a counselling-based approach. It's a bit like music, really. You've got genres and then subgenres underneath that. But I think they're the pop and the rock, if you like, in terms of it. And counselling, again, these are stereotypes and extremes, and most therapies blend somewhere in the middle. But on the other extreme, you've got counselling, which is more, I guess, what people have seen in movies, people sitting, lying on the couch, talk about your childhood, more around emotional processing, more around self-discovery and self-actualization and things like that. So it's less technique driven, more about being guided and working through emotional difficulties. And generally it's trying to identify what people want in that kind of situation. Do you want to sit in a room and process and just talk to a counsellor? And that's absolutely fine. It can be really, really effective. Or do you want to look at reducing symptoms? As I've alluded to this before, I think CBT generally for anxiety is the gold standard in terms of treatment. When it comes to burnout, stress, depression, or low mood, for want of a better word, the outcomes are relatively similar between CBT and a number of counselling approaches. So it does comes down to preference, I think, at that point. And
is it a therapy that would be appropriate for someone with maybe OCD, for example? Yeah,
so CBT, so OCD is an anxiety disorder. So OCD, PTSD, health anxiety, social anxiety, the number of sort of defined anxiety disorders, CBT would be the thing for that. That is like first line treatment for any defined anxiety disorder. It's when you're in the stress, low mood kind of ballpark where you'd maybe start to look at other modalities to therapy. Or if people have had CBT before and haven't got on with it, then you might want to explore different options. But I think certainly for the anxiety disorders, we'd be looking at suggesting CBT.
How does someone go about finding a CBT therapist?
So CBT, you can, there's a wonderful NHS talk therapy services which people can engage with. Obviously, a lot of employers fund their own EAP services, which some do and some don't include CBT. So talking to your, if you feel comfortable talking to a line manager and occupational health can point you in the right direction. There are, Spire themselves have a self-funding CBT therapy and counselling. If people want to go along that route, you can look at BABCP website, who are the accrediting bodies for CBT. I'd always recommend that and making sure somebody is accredited on the BABCP website. How else? I would probably the main ways: GP, occupational health advisors, and seeing if there's anything that way. If not, exploring kind of private options, like I say, Spire Mental Health have got self-pay options, and there are lots of other kind of organisations that can provide that.
And you mentioned EAP a second ago. Just for the benefit of everyone who might be watching this, Employee Assistance Programme. Quite a lot of employers have got one in there, so CBT could be an alternative counselling route through an EAP.
Yeah, I agree. In our service, some organisations have EAP to CBT kind of pathways. So you may engage with the EAP and you may have 6 sessions. Often it's sort of 6 sessions of a bit more generic counselling. But some organisations do have this pathway, so it's always worth asking to see, is this pathway available into a CBT or another modality of therapy.
Okay, excellent. Now, you mentioned the 3 things earlier, and they've gone out of my head already, but I immediately formed an acronym in my head, which was ACE.
Yeah.
So is that how you remember it?
Yeah.
So what does ACE stand for again?
So achievement, connection, enjoyment, the big 3 that we look for.
Achievement, connection, and enjoyment. Yeah. So on that last point, and I'm going right off on a random, this is not even on my notes here, but I love, I think there's a famous Japanese sort of aesthetic expert called Marie Kondo that talks about how you make your house amazing, and she says that if you hold something in your hands and it doesn't spark joy, why have you got it? So does that kind of fall into the same kind of track lines as yours? Is it sparking joy? So that enjoyment thing.
I guess the risk of that is, particularly if feeling, if we're getting into the realms of depression,
the
risk is getting into emotional kind of reasoning.
Yeah.
Because some things, because of your mood state, won't spark anything.
Okay.
And actually, you'd end up with an empty house if you did that.
Okay,
When you were feeling
so it's a hard and fast rule, not just that.
Yeah. But I think, if you're in a good place, then obviously that could be helpful. But I think, CBT kind of leans into logic a lot more than emotion. I would say, and for good reason. When we think about this cycle I mentioned earlier in terms of thoughts, feelings, behaviors, cognitions, feelings, and behaviors, feelings also influence our thoughts.
Yeah.
So if we're feeling anxious or feeling depressed or feeling low in mood or feeling burnt out, it's going to change, like I alluded to earlier, it's going to change our thought processes. So if we're feeling hopeless, we begin to see the world as quite a hopeless place.
Yeah.
Sort of this
Sure.
kind of feedback loop. So the Marie Kondo thing is, I'm feeling down about this. Oh, this is rubbish as well. So I'm just gonna,
Gotcha.
Yeah,
good point. And the connection part of that, is that all about us as social beings, and whether it be friends, family, or loved ones?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's. I think when I talk to people about connection, I talk about connection to something bigger. You mentioned about Norwich City earlier, but there's sort of connection and connectedness to. It doesn't necessarily have to be on a one-to-one basis, but for me, I think it's feeling part of something bigger, feeling part of society, or feeling part of an organization, or something bigger than yourself. I think there's an approach to therapy, and this comes under the CBT banner. That's where you get into brand names of different things, but acceptance commitment therapy, and they take kind of this ACE thing further and actually. Maybe throw the ACE thing out the window and go and work and do a really good piece around values.
Yeah.
And go, okay, what are your personal values? So, broad strokes we use ACE, but you might sit and work with somebody with actually, okay, connection is a value, but actually there's something else that's more valuable, which is, independence.
Yeah.
So actually then work with that, it would become an I rather than ACE, you get ACI, and it's flexible. And I think that's where CBT was in its infancy, was very much about proving itself from an evidence-based perspective, and being nice, recommended, and being picked up by the NHS. I think as over the years, it's become a little bit more flexible and kind of starts to take things from different therapies. And like I say, ACT is one of those things I certainly steal from. So the values work and things like that are really helpful to frame that behavioural work. And direct it to the person sat in front of you. So rather than go, here's an ACE sheet, get on with it, you sit and you work and you go, okay, well, achievement, yes, cool, but actually helping others is a better value for us to work towards, and we'll measure that. How much in this week have you felt like you've helped other people?
I'm fascinated by this subject. There aren't, in my mind, I think there are more men in my life, and I'm older than you, that are completely closed off to the idea of anyone talking to them about themselves and how they feel. Yeah. So I think anything that we are doing in our space that remotely shines a torch on the importance of being open to the idea of some kind of therapy, CBT or otherwise, is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I think I might chop it out of 38. I lose track of it. So I think I look younger than I am, and I think I've been around.
You do look younger than 38.
Yeah, I'll take that as a compliment. But I think there's an element of, one of the big things for me was paternal mental health, and just the eye opener. And you're right. I think I was saying this to Christiana, that there's almost two extremes. I think that there's the if you want the boomer generation, or the which is mental health equals being locked up in an asylum, and it's
or to be frowned upon, or to be whispered. There's some shame around it.
Or they've got the other end of the spectrum. Actually, there might not be. I don't know. I think there's somewhere in the middle where things have become potentially over pathologized, and ego therapy for absolutely anything. I think there's probably a nice, neat, sweet spot in the middle where we go, okay, this is helpful. This is less helpful to frame as something that needs it. But yeah, you're right. I think I did a year working in a respiratory team, which is obviously a lot of older adults, and it's hard work actually.
Yeah.
You often have to frame it, you have to package it, I think, in a way which is a bit more accessible and acceptable, I think, to people.
Liam, that's been really, really helpful. Thank you so much for shining a torch on such an important subject. Thank you for being on EBC TV, and stay safe and stay well yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.